Alright then, this is going to be my review of Cosmos, the famous science book published by the esteemed Pulitzer Prize winning Carl Sagan in 1980. It's based off the original television series of the same name. Now, the version I have and the one that I'm reviewing is not the original version, but instead the 2013 version, with a foreword by Anne Druyan and Neil deGrasse Tyson. I've actually had this book for a while now. I got it when I was a kid, because I was really into science, To be honest, I never actually read it, though. I was able to understand a lot of complex scientific knowledge as a kid, and I breezed through a bunch of National Geographic books. But this book was certainly not a good fit for me as a little kid. I got through the first chapter, and then I kind of gave up trying to read it because I found it too long and too boring, and it didn't have any pictures in it. So for a long time, the book just kind of collected dust on my shelf. But with my recent deconversion from Christianity, I've experienced a sort of revival in scientific interests. So I knew this book was something I absolutely had to read. So now, as a 17-year-old, I read the book all the way through, and by this point in my life, I was able to fully appreciate it. Cosmos is, in my opinion, fully deserving of the title masterpiece. It's amazing, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself reading it. I'm not exactly someone who's all that familiar with Carl Sagan, and I don't really have an experience of being a fan of him. However, his brilliance as a scientist and writer is easily recognizable through his work. What I love about the book that I think makes it different from most scientific education materials is that it doesn't just present scientific facts and theories. It also goes into great detail about how those facts and theories came to be known. One of the greatest things about science, is its explanatory power and how it can, accomplish great things, but it can also do them consistently because it follows a certain set of rules, and this book illustrates that fact perfectly. Because any time that Carl Sagan ever presents any information, he goes into depth how that information was discovered, who discovered it, and what methods were used. In that way, I think Cosmos is a great book for if you're just generally confused about the application of science, or, if you know someone else who, rejects the claims of science because they don't understand it. Another thing that I really appreciate about this book was how it gives a lot of focus to the history of science and the individuals within history who had an impact on the scientific development. A lot of scientific education sources don't really focus on the people who made these scientific discoveries, and certainly not the time period that they were living in, but, those two factors are incredibly important to the development of science, and Carl Sagan makes a very clear effort to bring those, specific factors to attention. Science is not just an object, it's dependent on the application of human beings and their limitations, and, Carl Sagan does a really good job of constructing the rich history of scientific advancement. And, because I honestly already knew most of the scientific knowledge presented in this book, what I really found myself being more interested in was just that I didn't really know a whole lot about, the history behind everything before reading this book. I really didn't know, that much about the specific factors that were the catalyst for scientific advancements, or what specific factors contributed to scientific regresses. For example, the book has a whole section about how Holland actually served as this haven for scientific minds in Europe during the period when the church was trying to suppress scientific inquiry, which I had no idea about before. At the end of the day, this book is really all about science, but in order to fully explain, science, it branches out and discusses so many other things. However, the book doesn't just focus entirely on the human aspect. Carl Sagan also places a heavy emphasis on the universe outside of ourselves. And when you read the book, you really just experience this massive scale of the cosmos, and you're really able to see how, just how small and insignificant in the grand scheme of things we are. As a nihilistic optimist, though, or an optimistic nihilist, I guess, I could really tell, though, that, Sagan was really wasn't trying to portray any sadness in that fact. His attitude is very clearly that, the universe is so much bigger than us and was here long before us and will be here long after us, but, in this relatively brief period, we exist and we're able to experience and understand the incredible vastness of the universe, and that's incredible. I honestly just don't really know if it's possible for someone to read this book and not just experience this incredible sense of wonder and awe. It's an amazing feeling. But to be honest, my favorite chapter of the book would have to be the last chapter, titled Who Speaks for Earth, which is a reflection on the condition of the human species as a whole. Who are the true representatives of the human species? Throughout history, there have been dictators and anarchists and religious fanatics and bigots and mass murderers, and there have been civil rights activists and brave leaders, heroic soldiers, amazing innovators and scientists. The human race is just incredibly varied, from the most intelligent scientists to the most willfully ignorant, from the most caring and kind-hearted to the most selfish and mean-spirited, the old, the young, the dark-skinned and light-skinned, the most powerful and the least powerful. We are all human beings in spite of our profound differences from each other. But Sagan, in his last chapter, remains skeptical of the fact that those differences won't lead to the human race tearing itself apart if they are not respected. The chapter talks a lot about nuclear weapons and what they really mean for the human species, which is, fitting, seeing as how during the time the book was written, the Cold War was still going on. And I think the book gives what is honestly one of the best quotes I've ever heard about the subject. We, the nuclear hostages, all the peoples of the earth, must educate ourselves about conventional nuclear warfare. Then we must educate our governments. We must learn the science and technology that provide the only conceivable tools for our survival. We must be willing to challenge courageously the conventional social, political, economic, and religious wisdom. We must make an effort to understand that our fellow human beings all over the world are human. Of course, such steps are difficult, but as Einstein many times replied when his suggestions were rejected as impractical or inconsistent with human nature, what is the alternative? Also, if you're a person who just really likes reading amazing quotes, then you're definitely going to have a field day reading this book. When I read books, I usually just tend to highlight quotes that I think are really great or important, and for real, by the end of the book, half the pages had been highlighted. Seriously, there are just so many amazing quotes in this book by Carl Sagan, and some examples of really good ones that can be found in the back of the book include, our achievements rest on the accomplishments of 40,000 generations of our human predecessors, all but a tiny fraction of whom are nameless and forgotten. There is no record, in the entire history of the library, that any of its illustrious scientists and scholars ever seriously challenged the political, economic, and religious assumptions of their society. The permanence of the stars was questioned. The justice of slavery was not. There are no sacred truths. All assumptions must be critically examined. Arguments from authority are worthless. Whatever is inconsistent with the facts must be discarded or revised. We must understand the cosmos as it is, and not confuse how it is with how we wish it to be. The obvious is sometimes false. The unexpected is sometimes true. Those afraid of the universe as it really is, those who pretend to non-existent knowledge and envision a cosmos centered on human beings, will prefer the fleeting comforts of superstition. They avoid rather than confront the world. But those with the courage to explore the weave and structure of the cosmos, even where it differs profoundly from their wishes and prejudices, will penetrate its deepest mysteries. We are the local embodiment of a cosmos grown to self-awareness. Seriously good stuff. Also, one of my personal favorite quotes regarding, this is just a personal thing, but regarding the growing Christian church and the destruction of the Alexandrian library in the 5th century, it was as if the entire civilization had undergone some self-inflicted brain surgery, and most of its memories, discoveries, ideas, and passions were extinguished irrevocably. Preach, man. I mean, I know Carl Sagan, he thought atheism was illogical and arrogant, but, I think this book is going to be very enjoyable for people who, are critical of religion and superstition, which Sagan certainly was. To come back to what I was talking about before, though, as I said, the last chapter of this book really gets you to think. I mean, we as a species pride ourselves on our humanity, we're this incredibly amazing thing, and our species has had so many amazing accomplishments, but if you really look at the long dark of human history, a lot of it is so primitive and violent and filled with fear and ignorance and failure, and now the same bipedal primates that fought against nature and themselves to create civilization now has the power to end it all in the push of a button. But in the end, Sagan's message is, I think, a hopeful one, of love and affection towards our fellow man. I mean, Sagan was an idealist, to be sure, but what makes this book just so great reading it now, instead of when it was first written, was that Sagan was sort of right. I mean, the Cold War ended, the number of nuclear weapons in Russia and the U.S. has been drastically decreased, and the world is really living in the most peaceful time in human history so far. I mean, it's certainly not perfect, and, who knows, could all really collapse in an instant. Apparently World War III is coming soon, according to some people, but, like Sagan, I'm an idealist. I really think that humanity has the ability to overcome itself. We simply need to live the advice of this book and reach not for our own selfish desires and our petty vengeances, but, what little power we think we have, but instead we need to reach the stars. I honestly think that, if this book was read by everyone in the world would be a much better place. As for complaints about the book, I do have a few, so I guess I'll just mention them now. The first thing that might be considered an issue is that, the book is long. It's almost 400 pages with text that really isn't that big, so it took me a while to get through it, and reading it can be a big commitment. Now, obviously, it needs to be long. It goes incredibly in-depth into very complex topics, but I'm just saying, the length could be a turnoff for some people, and I don't know if it's really the kind of book you would just read over and over again. Also, what I found kind of weird in the version that I have is there are these pictures in it, but, all of them are just arbitrarily concentrated in the middle section of the book, rather than being placed in sections where they actually relate to what the book is talking about. Speaking of placement, it's kind of a small critique, but Cosmos just has so many incredible sections in it that I really feel like I would just be able to come back and refer to a lot of them if the moment were to strike me. But when writing this review, I found it a little difficult to remember which parts were in, which parts of the chapters in the book. So just as a suggestion for if you're reading this book, it might help to put markers when you're reading it to further label different areas that are talked about in the chapters. Also, this complaint is something that's kind of unavoidable, and it's kind of dumb to talk about it, but obviously due to the fact that it was published in 1980, not all of the scientific information is going to be totally up to date. This book basically keeps saying that the estimated age of the universe is 15 billion years old. Haha, silly. It's 13.7 billion years old. Like, how could this book, not know that, even though it was written in the past? I don't know. But to be honest, I kind of think that that makes the book a little bit more interesting, because, not only does this book take you back centuries in time to let you learn about what it was like when people didn't have the knowledge that we do now, this book itself is now a piece of history, a look back into, what was known in the time that it was written and what was yet to be discovered. And because of the fact that, science has such remarkable prediction power, a lot of the predictions and theories pondered in this book have ended up coming to fruition. So yeah, Cosmos is a really great book, and I absolutely think it deserves all the credit that it gets. Overall, I would give the book a 9.4 out of 10 rating. It's truly amazing, and I would honestly much prefer if it were in every single hotel room in the United States in place of the Holy Bible. But that's just me. It's a much better book than that, honestly, and it's a lot easier to get through as well. Well, anyway, that was my video for today. If anyone liked it, feel free to subscribe. I will be coming out with more videos in the future. I'm actually currently working on a really long review of Theology of the Body for Beginners by Christopher West. So that'll be fun, I guess. Weirdly enough, I honestly have a lot more to say about that book than I do this one. But, not exactly good things. But, yeah, that'll probably come out next month, maybe in 2 parts. So, yeah, subscribe to my channel, and I will be back next time.